I walked into the Yosemite Ranger Station clutching a worn piece of paper, my stomach tight with first-day nerves. The coffee smell and radio chatter should have been comforting, but something felt off. Senior Ranger Patricia Williams stood behind the front desk like she'd been waiting for me. Weathered face, graying hair pulled back tight, eyes that had seen things. She looked at the paper in my hand. "You read it yet?" "Just the basics." I held up what I thought was my assignment sheet. "Trail patrol, visitor assistance." "Not that." She reached under the counter and pulled out a different paper. Older, creased, like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. "This." I took it. 5 numbered items in faded typewriter font. The header said, Ranger Protocols, Mandatory Compliance. 1. Always carry a whistle. If you hear one in the forest, blow yours once and leave immediately. Do not investigate if someone whistles back. 2. Ignore hikers carrying blue backpacks. Do not make eye contact. Do not offer assistance. Act as if they are not there. 3. The footbridge over Miller Creek is off limits during rain. Block access and redirect visitors to the Northern Trail. 4. Never approach a lone child without backup. Radio for assistance and maintain visual contact from a distance until help arrives. 5. Take seriously any visitor who warns you about the lady. Escort them to safety and file an incident report immediately. I read it twice, then looked up at Patricia. "Is this some kind of joke?" Her face stayed stone serious. "Memorize every word. Your life might depend on it. Come on. Blue backpacks. Whistles. This has to be hazing." "Do I look like I'm hazing you, Thompson?" She didn't. Patricia Williams looked like someone who'd never told a joke in her life. I folded the paper and shoved it in my pocket. "Fine, but this is ridiculous. Ridiculous keeps you alive out there." An hour later, David Rodriguez walked through the door with his gear bags slung over his shoulder. Dark hair, easy smile, the kind of guy who made friends in 5 minutes. My assigned partner for the next 6 months. "Marcus, right? Ready for some real ranger work?" I shook his hand. "Yeah, though I think someone's messing with me." I pulled out the paper. "You ever seen anything like this?" David took it, his eyebrows climbing as he read. "What the hell? Blue backpacks? The lady?" He looked genuinely confused. "This is new to me, man. I've been working summers here for 3 years." Relief hit me like cold water. "So you think it's bullshit too?" "Has to be. Probably some old-timer's idea of breaking in the new guy." He handed it back. I'd ignore it. We spent the morning on the mist trail, helping tourists with directions and reminding them to stay on marked paths. Normal stuff. David knew the park like he'd grown up here, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about rescues he'd been part of. "See that ridge up there? Last summer we pulled a guy off those rocks. Thought he could free climb without gear." David shook his head. "City people, man. No respect for what nature can do." The afternoon brought more of the same. Lost hikers, questions about permits, a family who'd somehow gotten their car stuck trying to drive up a hiking trail. David handled everything with the kind of calm confidence I hoped I'd develop. We were heading back toward the station around 4 when I heard it. A sharp whistle. 3 short blasts echoing through the trees. My hand went to the whistle on my belt before I even thought about it. The paper's words flashed in my head. Blow yours once and leave immediately. Someone's in trouble. David was already moving toward the sound. "Come on. Wait." I grabbed his arm. The rules said, "Forget those stupid rules. Someone might be hurt." The whistle came again, closer this time. David pulled free. "You coming or not?" I stood there for maybe 3 seconds, feeling the weight of that folded paper in my pocket. David was already 20 feet ahead, moving fast through the trees. "Damn it," I muttered, and went after him. My hand kept drifting to the whistle on my belt. The rule was clear enough. Blow once and leave. But I couldn't just let David go alone, even if he thought this was all nonsense. The undergrowth got thick fast once we left the main trail. Branches caught at my uniform, and I had to duck under a fallen log that David had vaulted over without breaking stride. He moved through the forest like he'd been doing it his whole life. The whistle came again. 3 sharp blasts, same as before. "There," David said, pointing ahead. "Maybe 50 yards. We pushed through a stand of young pines, their needles scraping against our sleeves. The forest floor was soft with years of fallen leaves, muffling our footsteps. I could smell the dampness of rotting wood and that clean, sharp scent of pine sap. "Hello?" David called out. "Anyone need assistance?" No answer. We kept moving. The whistle had sounded close, but distances could be tricky in the trees. Sound bounced around, echoed off the trunks and rocks. "Should be right here," David said, stopping in a small clearing between 2 massive sequoias. We looked around. Nothing. No person, no dropped pack, no signs anyone had been here recently. The ground was undisturbed except for our own footprints. A few birds called from somewhere overhead, but that was it. "Hello?" David tried again, louder this time. Silence. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The kind of feeling you get when you're walking alone at night and hear footsteps that stop when you stop. "Must have moved on," David said, but he sounded frustrated. Probably heard us coming and figured they didn't need help after all. Maybe. We waited another minute, listening. No whistle, no voices. Just the normal sounds of the forest. Wind in the branches, the distant call of a jay. "Well, this was a waste of time," David said, turning back toward the trail. "Come on, we should head back before Patricia starts wondering where we are." I followed him, but I kept looking over my shoulder. That dread in my stomach wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, I got to the ranger station early. Wanted to talk to David about what had happened, maybe see if he'd thought about those rules anymore. His locker was empty. Not just cleaned out, completely empty. No name tag on the front, no combination lock hanging from the latch, like it had never been used. I walked over to the desk area. David's nameplate was gone. The desk itself looked like it had been sitting unused for weeks. "Patricia?" I called out. She came out of the back office carrying a stack of incident reports. "Morning, Marcus. How was your first solo patrol yesterday?" I stared at her. "Solo patrol? Your assignment, Mist Trail Solo Patrol. How did it go?" "I wasn't on solo patrol. I was with David Rodriguez, my partner." Patricia's face went blank. Not confused. Blank. Like I'd just asked her about someone who didn't exist. "I'm sorry. Who?" "David Rodriguez. You assigned him to me yesterday morning. He came in right after our meeting carrying his gear bag." "Marcus, I don't know anyone named David Rodriguez." The cold feeling in my stomach spread up into my chest. "He's worked here for 3 years. Summers? He told me about pulling a free climber off a ridge last year." Patricia set down the reports and looked at me with genuine concern. "Marcus, are you feeling all right? You were assigned to solo patrol yesterday. I have the duty roster right here." She pulled out a clipboard and showed me. There was my name, clear as day. Marcus Thompson, Mist Trail, Solo Patrol. No David Rodriguez anywhere on the sheet. "This is wrong," I said. "You assigned him to me. I worked with him all day." "I think you might be confused. Let me check the employee database." She sat down at the computer and pulled up the personnel files. I watched over her shoulder as she scrolled through the list. Anderson, Chen, Hayes, Mitchell, Thompson, Williams. No Rodriguez. "Search for David," I said. She typed it in. 2 results: David Chen, a seasonal worker from 2 summers ago, and David Mitchell, who worked the north entrance. "David Rodriguez," I said. Rodriguez. She typed it in. No results found. "Marcus, there's no record of anyone by that name ever working here." I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. He was here yesterday. I talked to him. We worked together for 8 hours. Patricia stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. Why don't you sit down? You look pale. I'm not crazy, I said. David Rodriguez worked here. He was my partner. But even as I said it, I could hear how it sounded. I spent the next 3 days asking every ranger I could find about David. Jennifer Hayes, who worked the visitor center. Tom Anderson, who'd been here for 15 years. Mike Chen, David Mitchell, even the seasonal workers. Same response every time. Polite confusion, genuine concern for my mental state. No one had ever heard of David Rodriguez. No one remembered him at all. I started questioning everything after that. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the stress of the new job, the isolation, all of it was getting to me. 3 days of people looking at me like I needed professional help will do that to a person. But then I walked into the break room. There it was. David's coffee mug, sitting right there on the counter next to the sink. Still had coffee in it. Maybe 2 inches of cold black liquid with that film on top that forms when it sits too long. The mug had a faded logo from some brewery in San Diego. I picked it up. Real ceramic, real weight. Real coffee that smelled like it had been sitting there for days. If David never existed, whose mug was this? I asked Jennifer about it when she came in for her shift. Oh, that old thing's been there forever, she said, barely glancing at it. No idea whose it is. Probably left by some seasonal worker years ago. But I remembered David drinking from it. I remembered him complaining about the weak coffee, saying he missed the good stuff from back home. I remembered him washing it out every morning before we headed to the trails. The mug was real. David had been real, which meant something had happened to make everyone forget him. Something connected to those rules, to that whistle in the woods. Maybe if I'd blown my whistle like the protocol said, maybe if I'd made him leave with me instead of following him toward the sound, maybe David would still be here. I kept the mug, put it in my locker, physical proof that I wasn't crazy, that my memory wasn't playing tricks on me. David Rodriguez had existed, had worked here, had been my partner, and now he was gone like he'd never been born. The rules weren't hazing. They weren't some old-timer joke. They were real, and I'd learned that lesson the hard way. From now on, I was going to follow every single one of them, no matter how ridiculous they seemed. 2 weeks later, I was patrolling the Eastern Trail solo. The morning had been quiet, just a few early hikers heading up toward the falls. I was making my way back along the ridge trail when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, sitting on a fallen log about 30 yards ahead. She was wearing a white dress, the kind you'd see at a church service or family portrait. Pristine white, like she'd just put it on. Which was strange, considering she was sitting in the middle of the wilderness, at least 2 miles from the nearest parking area. I stopped walking. Something felt off about the whole scene. "Hello there," I called out, keeping my distance. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" The girl turned toward me. Her movements were too smooth, too deliberate. When she faced me fully, I saw her smile. Wide, stretching across her small face like someone had drawn it there with a marker. Her eyes were dark, not brown dark, but dark like looking into a deep well at night, and they never blinked. "Would you like to sit with me?" she asked. Her voice carried too far, too clear for a child that size. She patted the log beside her with one small hand. "It's nice here. Peaceful." Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get away from this kid, but I also remembered the 4th rule. Never approach a lone child without backup. I reached for my radio, keeping my eyes on the girl. "Base, this is Thompson on Ridge Trail. I need assistance with a lost child. About 2 miles east of the main trailhead." The girl's smile flickered when she heard me talking into the radio. Just for a second it wavered, like a TV signal cutting out. "Copy that, Thompson. Hayes is en route, ETA 15 minutes. I clipped the radio back to my belt. The girl was still staring at me with that unnatural smile, but something had changed. The friendliness in her voice was gone. "You don't need help," she said. "I'm not lost." I stayed where I was, about 20 feet back from the log. "What's your name, honey? Where are your parents?" Instead of answering, she started humming. It was a melody I'd never heard before, but it made my skin crawl. The tune was wrong somehow, like it was being played backwards or in a key that shouldn't exist. She never stopped staring at me, never blinked. Just sat there on that log in her perfect white dress, humming that awful song and smiling that smile that made my teeth ache. I kept my distance and waited. The humming went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. My radio crackled with static, and I heard Jennifer's voice cutting through. "Base to Thompson. ETA 10 minutes. Still need assistance?" The girl's head snapped toward my radio like a bird tracking movement. Her humming stopped. "Copy that," I said into the radio, not taking my eyes off her. "Still here." When I clipped the radio back to my belt, she tilted her head at an angle that made my stomach turn. Too far, like an owl. "You called for help," she said. Her voice was different now, colder. "I don't need help." "Just want to make sure you're safe," I said. She laughed. It sounded like glass breaking. I stayed right where I was and waited for Jennifer. 20 minutes later, I heard boots on the trail behind me. Jennifer appeared through the trees, moving quick but quiet. She took one look at me standing there and slowed down. "Where's the child?" she asked. I turned toward the log, empty. Just weathered wood and some scattered leaves. "She was right there," I said. "White dress, about 8 years old." Jennifer walked over to the log and crouched down next to it. She ran her hand over the bark, then checked the ground around it. "No footprints," she said. "Soil's soft from yesterday's rain. Should be tracks if someone was sitting here." I walked over and looked for myself. She was right. The dirt around the log was damp and would have taken an impression easy. But there was nothing. Just my own boot prints from where I'd been standing. "I'm telling you, she was here," I said. Sitting right on this spot, humming some weird song that made my teeth hurt. Jennifer stood up and brushed the dirt off her hands. She looked at me for a long moment, studying my face. "Your hands are shaking," she said. I looked down. She was right. I shoved them in my pockets. "Tell me exactly what happened," Jennifer said. So I did. The white dress, the unnatural smile, the way she moved like she was underwater, the voice that carried too far, the humming, the way she never blinked. Jennifer listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You did the right thing," she said. "Keeping your distance, calling for backup. But there's no proof she was ever here." "Sometimes there isn't," Jennifer said. "That doesn't mean it didn't happen." We walked back toward the main trail together. Jennifer was quiet for most of the way, but when we reached the junction, she stopped. "Marcus," she said, "those protocols Patricia gave you, whatever they say, follow them. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." I nodded. The paper was still in my pocket, and I could feel its weight like it was made of lead. The following month brought heavy rains that turned the park's streams into rushing torrents. Water came down in sheets for 3 days straight, and by the time it cleared, every creek and waterfall in the park was running high and fast. I got assigned to monitor the waterfall trail and warn visitors about the dangerous conditions. The main trail was still open, but some of the side paths were getting washed out, and the creek crossings were treacherous. I was making my second round of the day when I approached the wooden footbridge that crossed Miller Creek. The water below was running brown and angry, maybe 3 feet higher than normal. The bridge was still solid, but the current underneath would sweep you away if you fell in. That's when I saw him. A man standing right in the center of the bridge, looking down at the rushing water. He had on hiking boots, khaki pants, and a bright blue backpack that caught the light, like it was brand new. Blue backpack. I stopped walking. The second rule came back to me clear as day. Ignore hikers with blue backpacks completely. The man looked up and saw me. His face broke into a wide smile, and he waved with both hands like he was flagging down a rescue helicopter. "Hey there," he called out. Thank God. I've been waiting for someone to come by. Every instinct I had told me to walk over and help. That's what rangers do. That's what I'd been trained for. But I could hear Patricia's voice in my head, telling me my life depended on following those rules. The man started walking toward me, still waving. "I'm completely lost," he said. "My GPS died, and I can't figure out which trail leads back to the parking area. Can you help me out?" I turned away from him and kept walking down the trail. "Hey," he called after me. "Hey, Ranger, I'm talking to you." I forced myself to keep moving. One foot in front of the other. Don't look back. Don't acknowledge him. "Please." His voice was getting louder, more desperate. "I just need directions. My wife is waiting for me at the car." The desperation in his voice made me want to turn around, made me want to help. But I kept walking. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. Now he sounded angry. "I'm asking for help. It's your job." His voice followed me down the trail, getting more furious with each word. But I forced myself to keep going step after step until I couldn't hear him anymore. An hour later, I made my way back to the footbridge. Had to check. Maybe see if the guy made it out okay, even though I wasn't supposed to care. The bridge was empty. No sign of the man anywhere. No blue backpack, no khaki pants, nothing. Just the wooden planks slick with rain and the creek still running high and angry underneath. I walked to the center where he'd been standing, looked down at the rushing water, then back toward the trail. Guy could have found his way out, I figured. Could have gotten those directions from someone else. That's when I saw the railings. Deep gouges carved into the wood on both sides. 4 parallel lines, like something with claws had raked across the surface. The cuts were fresh, wood still pale where whatever made them had torn through the weathered exterior. I ran my fingers along the marks. They went deep, maybe half an inch into solid timber. I couldn't think of what could have done that. Bear claws, maybe. But bears didn't usually mess with bridges. And these gouges were at the exact height where a person would grip the railing. The rain kept falling. I stood there another few minutes, staring at those marks, then headed back to finish my patrol. A couple months later, when the leaves had turned and most of the summer crowds had cleared out, I was doing a routine sweep of the eastern trails. Quiet day. Cool air. Not many hikers willing to venture out with winter coming on. That's when I saw the old man. He was maybe 65, 70 years old. Asian guy, thin, wearing a light jacket and hiking boots that looked like they'd seen some miles. But he wasn't walking. He was standing perfectly still about 30 yards ahead, right in the middle of the trail, looking over his shoulder. I approached slow, the way you do when something feels off. He didn't notice me at first, too focused on whatever he thought was behind him. "Everything okay, sir?" He spun around fast, eyes wide. Took him a second to register that I was a ranger. "Oh," he said. "Oh, thank God." His voice was shaky, hands trembling a little. "You having some trouble out here?" That's when he grabbed my arm, fingers digging in through my jacket sleeve. "She's been following me," he whispered. "Since dawn, since I started hiking." I kept my voice calm. "Who's been following you?" "The lady." He glanced back over his shoulder again. Tall woman in an old dress, long dress, like from 100 years ago. She keeps appearing in the trees. The 5th rule kicked in like a cold slap. Take seriously any visitor who warns about the lady. Escort them to safety and file an incident report. "Tell me what you saw," I said. "Robert." He told me his name was Robert Chen, looked around nervously before continuing. At first, I thought it was just another hiker. Caught a glimpse of her through the trees, maybe 50 yards off the trail. But she was wearing this dress, this long white dress that didn't make sense for hiking. He paused, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool air. Then I saw her again. Different spot, but the same dress. Always at the edge of my vision, you know. Always just far enough away that I couldn't get a clear look. How many times did you see her? 6, maybe 7. His grip on my arm tightened, and she's getting closer. I looked past him down the trail. Nothing but trees and fallen leaves. Mr. Chen, I'm going to escort you back to the parking area. We'll get you to your car. You believe me? I believe you saw something that spooked you. That's enough. The walk back took 20 minutes. Robert stayed close, kept checking behind us every few steps. I didn't see anything, but I kept my radio ready and my eyes open. When we reached the main parking area, I walked him to his car, a blue Honda with California plates. My advice is to head home, I told him. Don't come back for a few days. I wasn't planning on it. He fumbled with his keys, hands still shaking. You think I'm crazy? I think you had an experience. Sometimes the woods play tricks on people. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't buy it. Neither did I, really. I watched him drive away, then pulled out my radio. Base, this is Thompson. I need to file an incident report. Static crackled for a few seconds before Patricia's voice came through. But there was something different about her tone. Sharper, more urgent than usual. What kind of incident? Visitor reported sighting of the lady. Northern Trail System. I've escorted him off the premises. Long pause. Longer than normal. All units, Patricia's voice finally came back. Avoid northern trails for the remainder of the day. Repeat, northern trails are off limits until further notice. I spent the afternoon helping visitors pack up and clear out. Patricia hadn't told me why we were evacuating everyone early, just that it needed to happen fast. No explanations, just orders. Sorry folks, park's closing early today due to safety concerns. That's all I was allowed to say. Over and over. The families didn't like it much, can't blame them. They'd driven hours to get here, some of them. But I kept thinking about Robert Chen's face when he grabbed my arm. The way his hands shook. Better disappointed than dead. By 6 o'clock, the parking lots were empty. Even the maintenance crews had packed up and headed out. I'd never seen the park this quiet. Not even in the dead of winter. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a bad storm. I radioed in to confirm the last visitor had left through the main gate. All clear on the eastern trails, I said. Copy that. Patricia's voice came back, still had that sharp edge to it. Good work today, Thompson. I wanted to ask her what we'd just prevented. What would have happened if Robert hadn't warned us? But something in her tone told me not to push it. Walking back to the station, I understood something had shifted. Robert's warning hadn't been about one old man seeing things. It had been about all of us, the whole park, and whatever was out there in the northern trails, we'd managed to keep it from spreading. Winter came early that year. First snow hit in October, and by November we were down to skeleton crews. Most of the seasonal workers had gone home, just the core staff left to handle the few hardy visitors who didn't mind hiking in freezing weather. I'd been following the rules for 6 months now. Every single one. 3 more blue backpack hikers had tried to get my attention. I'd walked past all of them without so much as a glance. Each time I'd felt their eyes on my back for way too long. Way too intense. 2 more whistle calls had echoed through the trees during my patrols. Both times my hand had gone straight to my own whistle. One sharp blast, then I'd gotten out of there fast. Never looked back to see what might have been following. 4 separate visitors had come to me about lady sightings. Each time I'd escorted them to safety and filed the reports. Each time, Patricia had issued the same order. Avoid the area until further notice. And each time I followed those rules, I felt it. That sense of something terrible sliding past me in the dark, like standing on train tracks and stepping aside just as the locomotive roared through. The other rangers had started treating me different. Not unfriendly exactly, but careful, like they recognized something in me that hadn't been there before. Jennifer would nod when she saw me coming back from patrol. "Quiet day?" she'd ask. "Quiet enough," I'd answer. She'd study my face for a moment, then nod again, like she was checking to make sure I was still all there. Tom Anderson had pulled me aside after one of my lady reports. "You're getting good at this," he'd said. "Better than most." Getting good at what? He'd looked around to make sure we were alone, staying alive. That's when I knew for sure. The other rangers weren't following these rules because they were hazing the new guy. They were following them because they worked, because people who didn't follow them disappeared, like David. My final patrol before winter closure was scheduled for December 15th. Light snow had been falling all morning, just enough to dust the trails white. The park would officially close to overnight camping after that, with only day-use areas staying open through the winter months. I was looking forward to the break. 6 months of watching over my shoulder had worn me down more than I wanted to admit. I finished my equipment check and headed to my locker to grab my extra gloves. The metal door swung open and something fluttered to the floor. A piece of paper, folded once, just like the original rules. My stomach dropped. I bent down and picked it up, unfolding it with hands that weren't quite steady. Same handwriting as before. Patricia's careful block letters, but this wasn't the original list. Additional protocols. Mandatory compliance 6. Never work alone during the full moon. Request backup or postpone patrol. 7. If temperature drops suddenly, more than 10 degrees in 5 minutes, seek shelter immediately. Do not investigate the cause. 8. Trust the rules completely, even when they seem impossible to follow. I read it twice, then a third time. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like those 8 lines carried the weight of things I didn't want to understand. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket next to the original rules. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket next to the original rules. 8 simple lines that might as well have been carved in stone. My survival depended on following them completely, even when they made no sense at all, especially when they made no sense. The last week before winter closure, everything changed, like the forest knew I was leaving and wanted to test me one final time. Tuesday morning, I heard the first whistle. 3 sharp blasts echoing from somewhere near the old growth section. My hand went to my belt, found my whistle, but I didn't blow it. Not yet. I crept behind a massive pine and watched. The shadows between the trees moved wrong, not like wind through branches or animals passing by. They flowed like water, pooling and stretching in directions that had nothing to do with the pale winter sun overhead. One shadow detached itself from a sequoia trunk and drifted toward where the whistle had sounded. I blew one sharp blast and got the hell out of there. Wednesday brought another whistle, then Thursday. Each time I hid and watched those unnatural shadows respond to the sound, each time I blew once and left. Friday was different. I was heading back from the falls when I rounded a bend and found them waiting. 6 hikers spread across the narrow trail, all wearing identical blue backpacks, bright blue like someone had dipped them in paint. They stood perfectly still, watching me. I stopped walking. The rule was clear. Ignore hikers with blue backpacks completely, but they blocked the entire trail, and there was nowhere else to go except straight through them. Their faces were blank, empty, eyes that caught the light and threw it back like a cat's, but wrong somehow. Too bright, too focused. I took a step forward. They didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. I pushed between two of them, keeping my eyes straight ahead. Their bodies felt cold even through my jacket, like walking past open freezers. One of them turned his head as I passed, but I didn't look back. By the time I reached the other side of the group, they were gone. Just mist hanging in the air where they'd been standing. Saturday was my final patrol. The temperature gauge read 42 degrees when I left the station. Normal for December. I was checking the footbridge when the air changed, not gradually like weather usually does. All at once, like someone had opened a door to winter itself. My breath came out in clouds. The creek started making crackling sounds as ice formed along the edges. The gauge on my belt read 2 degrees. 40-degree drop in maybe 10 seconds. I ran for the maintenance shed 50 yards up the trail. Got inside and slammed the door just as something large started moving through the trees. Heavy footsteps that didn't sound quite right. Too deliberate, too careful. It circled the shed for what felt like hours. I could hear it breathing. Deep, wet sounds that made my skin crawl. Every few minutes, claws scraped against the metal walls. Long, slow scratches like it was testing the strength of the building. I stayed away from the windows until I couldn't stand not knowing anymore. Through the small window facing the forest, I saw her. The lady. Tall figure in a dress that looked like something from 100 years ago. Long sleeves, high collar, fabric that moved without any wind. She stood between two pines about 30 feet away, perfectly still. Her eyes glowed in the darkness, not like reflected light, like they had their own source of power burning behind them. She watched the shed, watched me watching her. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. Time felt different with those glowing eyes fixed on the window. When dawn finally broke through the trees, she was gone. I walked out of the shed on unsteady legs. The sun was up full now, burning off the mist between the trees. My breath still came out in clouds, but the air felt warmer. Normal. The temperature gauge on my belt read 38 degrees. Not great, but nothing like the 2 degrees that had sent me running for cover. I checked it twice to be sure. The shed looked different in daylight. Just a plain metal building with scratches on the walls. Could have been from bears. Could have been from maintenance equipment scraping against it. Hard to say. But I knew what I'd heard circling outside. I knew what I'd seen standing between those pines. The walk back to the station took 20 minutes. My legs felt heavy, like I'd been running for hours instead of hiding in a shed. Every shadow between the trees made me look twice, but nothing moved except normal forest things. A squirrel ran up a pine. A jay called from somewhere overhead. Patricia was waiting when I got back. She stood by the front door with her arms crossed, watching me come up the path. "You look like hell," she said. "Long night." "I bet." She studied my face. "Temperature drop?" "Yeah, 40 degrees in about 10 seconds. She nodded like this made perfect sense. And I made it to the maintenance shed. Something circled it for a while. Then she showed up. Patricia's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. The lady, standing between two pines, watched the shed, watched me watching her. How long? Don't know. Time felt different. When the sun came up, she was gone. Patricia unlocked the station door and held it open for me. "Come on, we need to talk." Inside, she poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot that had been sitting since yesterday. It tasted like burnt water, but I drank it anyway. The warmth felt good. "You did everything right," she said. "Followed the temperature rule. Got to shelter. Didn't try to be a hero." What was that thing circling the shed? Guardian. They work together sometimes. The cold draws you out, makes you run. The guardian makes sure you don't run far. I thought about the heavy footsteps, the wet breathing. And if I hadn't made it to the shed, you did. That's what matters. Patricia sat down across from me at the small table by the window. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for our 2 vehicles. "Winter closure starts tomorrow," she said. "You'll have 4 months to think about whether you want to come back." Do I have a choice? Everyone has a choice, but once you've seen what you've seen, once you know what's out there. She shrugged. Most people can't go back to pretending the world is simple. I pulled the 2 pieces of paper from my pocket. The original rules, now worn soft from handling. The newer ones in Patricia's handwriting. Both felt heavier than paper should. "How many rangers have you given these to?" "Over the years? Maybe 30. "How many are still working here?" "You'd be surprised. More than you'd think. Less than I'd like." She finished her coffee and stood up. "Lock up when you're ready. Keys go in the lockbox by the door. I'll see you in April." "Patricia." She stopped at the door. "Yeah?" "David. What really happened to him?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, "He thought he knew better. Thought the rules were suggestions instead of laws. And now he never existed. That's how it works here. Break the wrong rule, and the forest just edits you out, like you were never born." She left me sitting at the table with my cold coffee and the papers spread in front of me. I read through both sets of rules one more time. 8 simple guidelines that had kept me alive in a place where reality bent around things that shouldn't exist. I folded the papers carefully and put them back in my pocket. The station felt different, empty, bigger somehow. I walked through each room, checking windows, making sure everything was secure. In the equipment room, I found David's coffee mug still sitting on the shelf where I'd left it, the only proof he'd ever existed. I picked it up and held it for a minute. Then I put it back. Some things were better left alone. The lockup took another hour. Checking inventory, shutting off water, making sure the building would survive 4 months of snow and cold. Standard procedure, but everything felt final. Like I was closing the door on more than just a building. Outside, the parking lot stretched empty under gray sky. My car sat by itself near the gate, looking small against the forest that pressed in on all sides. I could feel the trees watching. Not hostile exactly, just aware. I walked to my car and got in. The engine turned over on the second try. As I drove toward the gate, I looked in the rearview mirror. The station disappeared behind the trees, but the forest remained, waiting. I'd learned things this season that couldn't be unlearned. Seen things that changed how I looked at every shadow, every sound in the woods. The rules had become part of me now, as necessary as breathing. 4 months to decide if I wanted to come back. But I already knew the answer. The papers in my pocket felt warm against my chest as I drove through the gate and into the world where people still believed in simple explanations for everything. Where whistles were just whistles, and children in white dresses were just lost kids who needed help. I'd tried living in that world once, before I knew about the rules, before I understood that some places operated by different laws than the ones they taught in school. The forest had tested me and found me worthy. It had shown me its secrets and let me live to remember them. That meant something. That meant I belonged to something bigger than myself now. I pulled onto the main road and headed toward town, toward 4 months of ordinary life. But part of me would stay in those trees, keeping watch, waiting for spring. The rules had saved my life. Now they were my life. I'd be back.